I need you to trust me. One last time.
Greetings and salutations, guys. I'm here with my review of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, the 8th installment of a series that's been around for 29 years now, and also a series that I consider the greatest action movie series ever. Die Hard is the best action movie ever, but Mission Impossible, I think, is the best action franchise ever. I love these movies so much. I think only the second one is bad, and even there, I don't think it's terrible, but it's got a lot of big issues, and I do skip it on my rewatches. But otherwise, I really adore these movies, and think it's been an amazing sort of run with Christopher McQuarrie coming on and really kind of heading up these films from the fifth one forward. All of which is to say, I'm really bummed that I do not like this movie very much. That if this is the final one, and that final in the title in Hollywood, that never means anything for sure, and they're already kind of being cagey around, is this really the last movie? But if this is the last movie in this franchise, it's a pretty damn lackluster way to end what has been such a wonderful series. This is no longer called Dead Reckoning Part 2, but it is Dead Reckoning Part 2. We are kind of picking up with that storyline just a few months later. Going forward, the entity, that super powerful AI from that movie, has sort of not taken control of the world quite yet, but it seems like it's on its way to doing that. It's destabilizing nations. It is spreading untruths. No one can believe what they're seeing online. There is obviously some nods to topical things going on with the descriptions of events at the beginning of this movie. But right away, it also reminded me, oh yeah, I don't really dig the entity as a Mission Impossible villain. Yes, AI is a very real thing that is a very sort of real concern and where it's going, and there's a topical nature to that. But the way it is depicted in this movie, because it needs to be an on-screen threat of some kind, is still sort of a giant blue ball of energy that at one point, Ethan is going to sort of communicate with, and that what we're going to see on screen, just to see something on screen, will feel pretty much sci-fi. And as much as you can say, no, but AI is real. Yes, I know that. The way it comes off here still feels like a strange sci-fi bent. It just doesn't feel right as a Mission Impossible threat. And I felt that in Dead Reckoning, a movie that was my least favorite Mission Impossible movie in quite a while, but I still thought was really fun. But here that kind of gets extrapolated, and even more so, I was like, oh, I don't know, this isn't really working, this threat in this movie. And yes, you also have Issa Morales returning as Gabriel, the human threat who helped the entity rise to power. But in this movie, he becomes much more of sort of a cackling one-note villain than I thought he was in Dead Reckoning. Dead Reckoning had its issues, but I still felt like it delivered what you want from Mission Impossible movie, and still sort of checked those boxes. This time out, though, yeah, there is a lot of things that just don't really come together here. One big issue is that there is so much exposition, and the way it's handled is very inelegant. And there was clearly a thought about how are we going to deal with all this exposition, and they came up with a solution, but I don't think it works. And there was a little bit of this as well in Dead Reckoning, the method they used, but it gets a lot worse here, which is scenes where a bunch of characters are standing around together and they're explaining the situation, but then each of them is sort of finishing the sentence of the one before them. And I know you can say, well, this is a play on a classic spy movie or heist movie scene where we all talk about what everyone's role is and what they're going to do. And even the Mission Impossible series has done that kind of scene before. But this is something a little different, where it's just everyone keeps finishing a sentence in a way that makes them feel like they're a strange hive mind. It's hard to explain why it feels so weird and off when you're watching these scenes, and it's not just Ethan's group. It's also all the characters in the US government who are dealing with the threat of nuclear war raised by the entity. Angela Bassett returns here. Now her character is president. We've got all these people that are assisting her, played by a lot of great actors like Nick Offerman and Janet McTeer. But yeah, multiple scenes where all these people stand around a table and seem like they're possessed in some weird way because of the way they're talking to each other and the way that they're saying things that it feels like everyone else in the room already knows, and it's just being said for our benefit. And it just feels like I'd rather they do the thing where one character comes in and delivers the long monologue at a certain point and just figure out a way to, just get, a great actor who has some fun with something like that, instead of multiple scenes that just kind of not just drag on a little bit, but just make it feel silly and goofy. And it's funny because the Mission Impossible movies aren't realistic. Obviously, they're bigger than life, and we want them to be. But they still kind of sell as cool. Like, this is a cool spy movie, and Ethan Hunt is, this amazing hero who does spectacular things that almost everyone else in the world would die trying to do. But I don't want to say grounded. That doesn't seem quite right given the things Ethan does. But it still feels like I can invest in this crazy world in some sort of believable nature. And here it just starts to lose a hold of that. It's funny, the way they make these movies is kind of this famous/infamous method where they really begin almost all of them without a finished script, and they're making it up as they go. And there's a lot of famous stories in Hollywood of huge movies that have done that and usually go off the rails. But there's something in Mission Impossible that makes it work. And I love Christopher McQuarrie's deep dive podcasts he'll do where he talks about figuring things out on the fly, and what great sort of problem solvers it seems like everyone who works on these movies are. And it's really impressive because you watch, Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, Fallout. These movies are so great and they feel effortless when you're watching them. And then, of course, the stories behind the scenes they were anything but effortless. It was actually kind of chaos, making the films, figuring out the movies, changing them on set, rewriting them on set, going back for reshoots, and how much, they didn't have it and had to figure it out. And then you watch the final product, you go, well, that's fantastic. And so I don't know what happened here in these last two where, again, Dead Reckoning, not by any means, a disaster or anything, but just felt a little off. And then this one, a lot off. It just didn't come together this time. And is it because they tried to do this sort of big two-part story and it was a little more beholden to kind of a bigger continuity than this series usually does? And also there was sort of this onus to be like, this might be the finale and it has to feel bigger and more important. I don't know. That cheesiness I mentioned and that feeling of it being off, I think, is most prevalent in the first act. I think the middle of the movie might be sort of some of the strongest stuff, and there's some of my favorite sort of moments and beats and things that did, I think, hit home a little more in the center of the movie. But also some of that cheesiness comes from its sort of reverence for the past here, which is funny for me to say when I am a huge fan of this series, and I have reverence for the past of it. But there's something about the way they kind of look at the past and look at Ethan Hunt as a character here that feels like too much. They kind of build up Ethan, the way they talk about him, the way he's described, the way he's depicted in almost sort of like a Christ-like figure. And it can't help but feel like this strange sort of self-reflection of Tom Cruise because he produces these movies and he has embodied Ethan Hunt for so long. And, deserves all this credit for what a great, action hero Ethan Hunt is. And of course, the on-screen stunts he does is amazing. But just to have the movie itself talk about him in such glowing, amazing terms, it just feels like, okay, calm down a little here. And then also the references to the past. This is interesting because we knew going in that Rolf Saxon was returning from the first movie as William Donlow, a deep cut character who was, a peripheral character who was part of the very classic CIA heist break-in in that film. And I really enjoy him in this movie, actually. I think he gives a really good performance. He has way more screen time than I expected. And I thought it was a really fun way to circle back to the past and what might be the final movie in the franchise. I wish they'd kept it to just him, though, because there are a couple other major ties back to early installments of the franchise here. And it feels goofy and it doesn't feel sort of appropriate. And the reason I say that is because this is not the MCU or, our franchise built on interconnectivity and a franchise where if they bring back a bunch of characters or locations from the past, you go, well, yeah, that's kind of the foundation it's built on. When the MCU does that, we've come to expect that, and it's kind of part of the fun. Mission Impossible had been very standalone in the early movies. Then in the McQuarrie era, it got a little more serialized. There were a couple of recurring villains, more recurring characters, and I enjoyed that. But it wasn't like still heavily built on continuity. This movie suddenly having a bunch of connections to the past at the same time happening just feels weird. It just becomes kind of silly to the point that one character that we meet in this movie has a very nebulous connection to the past that they never quite articulate what it is. They give you hints, but they don't quite say what it is. And I didn't really care just because I was like, why is there another connection to the past in this movie? This is so odd. If they just kept it to Donlow coming back, I think that would have been really good. And like I said, I really like Ralph Saxon in the movie. And when it comes to the entire cast, look, it's an amazing group of actors. Tom Cruise continues to be so dedicated to this role, and the physicality he brings to it and what he's willing to do is still amazing and, unprecedented when you watch these movies. But I don't like that this movie is sort of so self-serious and treats that, what's going on as end of the world stakes and that this might be the final chapter. So we're going to be not humorless, but a lot less like we're having fun here than a lot of the other movies. And it makes a lot of the, team stuff just feel much more sluggish than in other films in the series. And they kind of start to all just feel nebulous. And like Haley Atwell as Grace, I really liked her in Dead Reckoning. She's got a lot of screen time here, but I don't think we get to know Grace any better. She seems like much more of a blank slate than she did in that last movie. And then we get a lot more screen time with Greg Tarzan Davis as Degas, who was, he played the partner of Shea Wiggum in the last movie who was hunting Ethan. In this movie, his character joins Ethan's team, but we don't really get to know anything about him. There's like no characterization to the guy except that he's like fighting the good fight, he's dedicated, but I couldn't tell you almost anything about him on the personality side. And yeah, these movies are not deep dives into the members of the IMF, but I feel like we kind of know enough about what everyone's, not just their role in the team is, but kind of what their vibe is. And Degas, I don't know anything about him. But of course, this is ultimately an action series, so how about the action? It's good. In no way would I say like this isn't, a solid movie on the action side, but they've raised the bar so high on this series that this doesn't feel like a standout on that level. And some of the sequences I think were a little ill-conceived. Like there's one where Ethan goes underwater for an extended period of time. He's, going through a sub. If you saw the last movie, you know why he's going in through this sub. It's impressive visually. First of all, of course, Tom Cruise is really doing the diving because of course. And then I really liked what they do with perspective because this is an underwater a sub that has crashed to the bottom of the ocean and it's turning. So they have a lot of fun with what is up, what is down. It's flooding with water, but where's the water coming from keeps changing. Is it coming from the ceiling, the floor, the side? That was really cool. But there's not that much excitement beyond that, and it kind of goes on a little too long. And yeah, I felt like, that could have been more exciting. Dead Reckoning's action I thought was a lot more dynamic than this movie's was. I really do enjoy the biplane sequence that you've definitely seen. It's all over the posters. It's the big Tom Cruise hanging from something scene that these movies kind of all have now. It's definitely exciting. I also really do admire that Tom Cruise is just like, yeah, you can show me looking pretty ridiculous because I really was hanging off a plane, which means the wind was pushing my face and my cheeks in a way that looks like a cartoon and I don't look very attractive. And I like that he was just like, yeah, we want to sell the reality of it, that I really did this, which he did, so keep those shots in. I admire that. Fun sequence. But the sequence at Fallout, the finale of Fallout, there's some similarities to what's happening here, especially how it's intercutting between what's happening with Ethan and with other members of the team. And the Fallout sequence was better. It was more exciting. I did enjoy this on the IMAX spectacle level. Side on IMAX theater, there's some great visuals, but I didn't think it was like top tier for the action in a series that has delivered some of the best action we've ever seen. So yeah, this had me hoping this is not the last one, because I think if this is the last one, it is, just a bummer way to end a series that I love so much. I love to rewatch these films, and it feels like this is how it kind of peters out at the end. This is what they do. There's just some moments that are meant to have a lot of weight and impact that don't. And a lot of moments that, not unintentional laughs quite, but there's a few Yeah, just something didn't gel here. Look, this movie took forever to make, on the heels of Dead Reckoning taking a long time to make, and we know, Dead Reckoning had huge COVID delays, and this movie had the strike in the middle of it, but it was already taking forever. It just feels like, this more than ever, even though the other movies also were insane behind the scenes and so many moving parts. It feels like for whatever reason, this one was, more complicated than ever. And maybe it got more complicated than it needed to be finally. So yeah, I want to see another one and maybe scale back a little bit, not on the action stuff, but yeah, I feel like it just went into some places that didn't feel right for the series, and they couldn't quite hone it in. And that's unfortunate because what Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie now for most of the series have done together is a really huge accomplishment. And, they deserve a ton of kudos for that. This is not their best effort. They can't all be. But yeah, I want a Mission Impossible 9 now, to maybe go out on a higher note. So those are my thoughts on Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Ah, man, wish I liked it more. If you could like and subscribe, that'd be great. Thanks a lot, guys.